Question 1. Market research demonstrates a significant opportunity for Mattel to introduce a new line of interactive educational toys that utilize AI-powered personalized learning experiences for young children. What is the most appropriate approach for Mattel to take to mitigate potential risks associated with this product launch? Option A. Rely on the marketing team's judgment regarding the appropriateness of advertising claims and data collection practices, without formal legal or compliance review. Option B. Focus primarily on the innovative technological aspects of the toy and its market appeal, deferring detailed legal and ethical reviews until after the product is established. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that evaluates compliance with all relevant consumer protection laws, data privacy regulations, including those specific to children, and advertising standards, and develop mitigation strategies accordingly. Option D. Proceed with the product launch as quickly as possible to capture market share, assuming that existing company-wide compliance policies are sufficient. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that evaluates compliance with all relevant consumer protection laws, data privacy regulations, including those specific to children, and advertising standards, and develop mitigation strategies accordingly. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight designed to protect investors and ensure market integrity. The challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of new market opportunities with the imperative to comply with all applicable laws and ethical standards. A failure to do so can result in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate potential risks associated with new product launches, especially when those products involve novel technologies or target new demographics. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that proactively identifies potential legal, ethical, and reputational issues before a product is launched. This includes evaluating compliance with consumer protection laws, intellectual property rights, data privacy regulations, and advertising standards. By systematically analyzing these factors, Mattel can develop strategies to mitigate identified risks, ensuring that the new product launch is both commercially viable and legally sound. This aligns with the ethical obligation of a company to act responsibly and transparently, and with regulatory requirements that mandate due diligence and risk management. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on market potential without a thorough risk assessment fails to uphold regulatory obligations. For instance, prioritizing rapid market entry over a detailed review of advertising claims could lead to violations of consumer protection laws, which prohibit deceptive or misleading advertising. Similarly, neglecting to assess data privacy implications when collecting information from children would contravene regulations like the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, in the U.S., leading to severe penalties. Another incorrect approach might be to assume that existing compliance frameworks are sufficient without specific evaluation for the new product, potentially overlooking unique risks associated with innovative features or target audiences. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adapt to evolving regulatory landscapes. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the regulatory environment relevant to the product and its target market. This involves consulting legal and compliance experts, conducting thorough due diligence, and documenting the risk assessment and mitigation strategies. The process should prioritize adherence to legal and ethical standards, ensuring that business objectives are pursued within a framework of responsible corporate conduct. Question 2. Investigation of potential risks associated with a new line of electronic toys for Mattel, a global toy manufacturer, requires a robust approach to risk assessment. Which of the following best describes the most appropriate methodology for Mattel to adopt in this situation, considering the need for regulatory compliance and consumer safety? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that involves identifying potential hazards across the product lifecycle, analyzing the likelihood and severity of associated risks, and developing mitigation strategies aligned with relevant toy safety regulations and industry best practices. Option B. Focus the risk assessment on the immediate manufacturing costs associated with potential safety failures, such as the expense of replacing faulty components, rather than on the broader implications of consumer harm, Option C. Rely primarily on the subjective opinions of the product development team regarding potential safety concerns, as they have the most intimate knowledge of the product's design. Option D. Prioritize risk assessment efforts on issues that have historically caused the most product recalls for Mattel, assuming that past problems are the most significant indicators of future risks. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that involves identifying potential hazards across the product lifecycle, analyzing the likelihood and severity of associated risks, and developing mitigation strategies aligned with relevant toy safety regulations and industry best practices. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment principles within the context of a specific regulatory environment, likely related to toy manufacturing and consumer safety. The pressure to quickly identify and mitigate potential risks associated with a new product launch, while adhering to strict compliance standards, demands careful judgment. A failure to properly assess and manage these risks could lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, harm to consumers, particularly children. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive evaluation of potential hazards, considering both the likelihood of an event occurring and the severity of its impact. This approach is right because it aligns with the fundamental principles of risk management mandated by regulatory frameworks designed to protect consumers and ensure product safety. Specifically, it requires identifying potential hazards, e.g., material safety, design flaws, manufacturing defects, assessing the probability of these hazards manifesting, and determining the potential consequences, e.g., injury, recall, legal action. This proactive stance is ethically sound and legally defensible, demonstrating a commitment to due diligence and consumer welfare. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without a thorough risk assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from prioritizing short-term financial gains over long-term safety and compliance, which directly contravenes regulatory obligations to ensure product safety. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past experiences without a structured analysis would also be flawed. This lacks the rigor required by regulatory bodies and can lead to overlooking novel or subtle risks. Furthermore, an approach that delegates risk assessment entirely to external consultants without internal oversight or validation would be problematic, as it abdicates internal responsibility for compliance and safety. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to Mattel's products. This involves identifying all relevant laws, standards, and guidelines. Next, a structured risk assessment methodology should be applied, encompassing hazard identification, risk analysis, likelihood and impact, and risk evaluation. This process should be iterative and involve cross-functional teams. Finally, decisions regarding risk mitigation strategies should be made based on the evaluated risks, ensuring that chosen actions are proportionate to the identified risks and compliant with all regulatory requirements. Question 3. Market research demonstrates significant positive consumer interest in Mattel's upcoming toy line, with early focus group results showing high engagement. However, internal analysis also highlights potential supply chain disruptions and increased competition from a rival manufacturer. When communicating projected sales figures to investors, which approach best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical business practices for Mattel? Option A. Present a balanced projection that incorporates both the positive consumer interest and the identified supply chain and competitive risks, providing a realistic outlook. Option B. Focus solely on the potential for aggressive sales growth, assuming that any supply chain or competitive issues will be resolved before they significantly impact sales. Option C. Delay the investor communication until all potential supply chain and competitive issues are fully resolved, even if it means missing a scheduled reporting deadline. Option D. Emphasize the overwhelmingly positive consumer feedback and project aggressive sales growth, downplaying any potential supply chain or competitive risks. Correct answer is D. Emphasize the overwhelmingly positive consumer feedback and project aggressive sales growth, downplaying any potential supply chain or competitive risks. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, has a fiduciary duty to its shareholders and must adhere to stringent regulatory requirements designed to ensure fair and transparent markets. The pressure to meet or exceed market expectations, especially in the context of a new product launch, can create an incentive to misrepresent information. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of all available data, including both positive and negative indicators, to form a realistic projection. This approach aligns with regulatory frameworks that prohibit misleading statements and require accurate financial reporting. Specifically, under U.S. securities laws, companies are obligated to provide truthful and complete information to investors. Failing to disclose known risks or exaggerating potential success constitutes a violation of these principles and can lead to severe penalties, including fines and reputational damage. Ethical considerations also dictate that Mattel should not engage in practices that could deceive investors or manipulate stock prices. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on optimistic market feedback without considering potential headwinds or competitive threats would be professionally unacceptable. This would represent a failure to conduct adequate due diligence and could lead to the dissemination of misleading information, violating regulations such as the Securities Act of 1933 and the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, which mandate truthful disclosures. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes short-term stock price gains over long-term sustainable growth by inflating projections would also be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This demonstrates a disregard for the principles of fair disclosure and investor protection. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape and internal ethical guidelines. This involves gathering comprehensive data, critically evaluating all information, identifying potential risks and uncertainties, and consulting with legal and compliance departments. The process should prioritize accuracy, transparency, and fairness to all stakeholders, ensuring that any public statements are well supported by evidence and reflect a balanced view of potential outcomes. Question 4. Market research demonstrates a significant opportunity for Mattel to launch a new interactive toy line that collects user data to personalize play experiences. Which of the following approaches to managing the associated risks is most aligned with regulatory requirements and professional best practices for a publicly traded company like Mattel? Option A. Focus primarily on the potential for positive media coverage and consumer excitement, assuming that any regulatory or ethical concerns will be addressed reactively if they arise. Option B. Implement a cost-saving measure by conducting a minimal, informal risk review based on internal assumptions, without engaging external legal or compliance expertise. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive, cross-functional risk assessment involving legal, compliance, product development, and marketing teams to identify, analyze, and develop mitigation strategies for all potential risks, including data privacy, consumer protection, and financial reporting implications, before product launch. Option D. Prioritize rapid market entry and revenue generation, deferring detailed risk assessment and mitigation planning until after the product has been launched and initial sales data is available. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive cross-functional risk assessment involving legal, compliance, product development, and marketing teams to identify, analyze, and develop mitigation strategies for all potential risks, including data privacy, consumer protection, and financial reporting implications, before product launch. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, has a fiduciary duty to its shareholders and must adhere to strict regulatory requirements regarding financial reporting and risk management. The introduction of a new product line, especially one with potential ethical implications like those related to child development and data privacy, necessitates a thorough and proactive risk assessment. Failure to adequately identify and mitigate these risks can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal liabilities. Careful judgment is required to balance innovation and market opportunity with the imperative of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that systematically identifies, analyzes, and evaluates potential risks associated with the new product line. This includes considering regulatory compliance, ethical considerations, data privacy, and potential market reception. By engaging cross-functional teams and utilizing established risk management frameworks, Mattel can proactively develop mitigation strategies. This approach aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory expectations, such as those outlined by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, for public companies in the U.S., which mandate robust internal controls and risk disclosure. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to responsible product development and consumer protection. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential for rapid market penetration without a corresponding risk assessment fails to acknowledge the regulatory landscape. This oversight could lead to non-compliance with consumer protection laws, data privacy regulations, like COPPA, if applicable to the product's target audience, and financial reporting standards, resulting in significant legal and financial repercussions. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost-cutting by deferring comprehensive risk analysis to a later stage is also professionally unacceptable. This delay increases the likelihood of unforeseen issues arising, which can be far more costly to rectify than proactive assessment. It also signals a disregard for regulatory due diligence and ethical responsibility, potentially exposing Mattel to significant liabilities and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal feedback from a limited group of stakeholders without a structured risk assessment process is insufficient. While stakeholder input is valuable, it does not replace the systematic and objective analysis required to identify all potential risks, including those that may not be immediately apparent to a select group. This approach lacks the rigor necessary to meet regulatory expectations for comprehensive risk management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, multi-stage risk assessment. This begins with defining the scope of the assessment, identifying all potential risks across various categories: operational, financial, legal, ethical, reputational, analyzing the likelihood and impact of each risk, and then developing appropriate mitigation and contingency plans. Regular review and updates to the risk assessment are crucial, especially as market conditions and regulatory environments evolve. Engaging legal counsel and compliance officers early in the process is essential to ensure adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. Question 5. When evaluating potential risks for Mattel, which approach to risk assessment would best ensure compliance with U.S. financial reporting regulations and uphold ethical standards? Option A. Prioritizing risks based on a comprehensive analysis of their likelihood and potential impact across all business functions, considering both financial and reputational consequences. Option B. Assigning priority to risks that can be resolved with the least amount of effort and resources, regardless of their potential severity. Option C. Concentrating on risks that have the lowest potential financial impact, as these are less likely to cause significant problems. Option D. Focusing primarily on risks that cause immediate operational disruptions, as these are the most visible and require swift action. Correct answer is A. Prioritizing risks based on a comprehensive analysis of their likelihood and potential impact across all business functions, considering both financial and reputational consequences. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight, particularly concerning financial reporting and risk management. The challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing potential risks that could impact the company's financial health and reputation, requiring a nuanced understanding of both business operations and the relevant regulatory landscape. Careful judgment is needed to distinguish between minor operational issues and significant risks that necessitate immediate attention and resource allocation. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that considers the likelihood and potential impact of various risks across different business functions, aligning with the principles of robust corporate governance and compliance frameworks. This approach is professionally sound because it proactively identifies potential threats to Mattel's objectives, enabling the company to implement mitigation strategies. Specifically, regulatory frameworks such as those overseen by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, in the U.S. mandate that public companies maintain effective internal controls over financial reporting and conduct thorough risk assessments to identify and address potential misstatements or fraud. Ethical considerations also demand transparency and accountability in financial reporting, which a comprehensive risk assessment supports. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate operational disruptions, such as a temporary supply chain delay, fails to consider the broader financial and reputational implications. While operational issues are important, they may not represent the most significant risks to the company's overall stability or compliance status. This approach could lead to misallocation of resources, diverting attention from more critical risks that could result in regulatory penalties or significant financial losses. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes risks based on the ease of resolution overlooks the potential severity of risks that might be more complex to address. A risk that is difficult to mitigate but has a high potential impact on Mattel's financial reporting integrity or compliance with regulations like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX, should be given higher priority. This approach risks overlooking systemic issues that could have long-term detrimental effects. A third incorrect approach that exclusively considers risks with the lowest potential financial impact ignores the possibility of cumulative effects or the potential for seemingly minor risks to escalate into major problems. Regulatory bodies often look for a holistic view of risk management, and focusing only on low-impact risks can be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence and a lack of preparedness for unforeseen events. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment methodology. This typically includes identifying potential risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, evaluating existing controls, and prioritizing risks based on their severity. Professionals should then develop and implement appropriate mitigation plans and regularly review and update the risk assessment to reflect changes in the business environment and regulatory landscape. This systematic approach ensures that Mattel can effectively manage its risks and maintain compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Question 6. Market research demonstrates that a significant proposed regulatory change in toy safety standards is under consideration by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC. This proposed change could impact Mattel's manufacturing processes and material sourcing for several of its popular product lines. When evaluating the strategic implications of this potential regulatory shift on Mattel's upcoming product development roadmap, which of the following approaches best aligns with professional and regulatory expectations? Option A. Focus primarily on the current market demand for Mattel's existing products, assuming that any regulatory changes will be minor or easily adaptable without significant business disruption. Option B. Prioritize the launch of new products that are projected to generate the highest immediate revenue, deferring any detailed analysis of the proposed CPSC regulations until after their final enactment. Option C. Rely on industry lobbying efforts to prevent the proposed CPSC regulations from being enacted, and therefore avoid the need for any internal risk assessment or strategic adjustments. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that quantifies the potential financial impact of the proposed CPSC regulations on Mattel's supply chain and product costs, and develop contingency plans for alternative materials or manufacturing processes. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that quantifies the potential financial impact of the proposed CPSC regulations on Mattel's supply chain and product costs, and develop contingency plans for alternative materials or manufacturing processes. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, has a fiduciary duty to its shareholders and must adhere to strict regulatory requirements regarding financial reporting and risk management. The pressure to meet ambitious growth targets can create an environment where the temptation to overlook or downplay potential risks is high. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with ethical conduct and legal compliance. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment process that integrates potential regulatory changes into the evaluation of business strategies. This approach is correct because it aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance. Specifically, under U.S. securities laws and SEC guidance, companies are expected to identify and disclose material risks, including those arising from potential changes in the regulatory landscape. By actively assessing how proposed regulations might impact Mattel's operations, supply chain, product safety, or marketing, the company can make informed decisions, implement mitigation strategies, and ensure transparent reporting to investors. This demonstrates a commitment to responsible business practices and shareholder value protection. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on current market conditions without considering the impact of proposed regulations, fails to meet the standard of due diligence. This oversight could lead to significant financial and reputational damage if the regulations are enacted and Mattel is unprepared. It represents a failure to adequately identify and manage foreseeable risks, potentially violating disclosure requirements under securities laws. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes short-term financial gains over potential long-term regulatory compliance risks is also professionally unacceptable. This approach demonstrates a disregard for the legal and ethical obligations of the company and its management. It could be interpreted as a form of willful blindness or even an attempt to mislead investors about the true risk profile of the company. Such actions can lead to severe penalties, including fines, lawsuits, and damage to the company's reputation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This framework should include 1. Identifying potential risks, including regulatory changes. 2. Assessing the likelihood and impact of these risks. 3. Developing mitigation strategies. 4. Implementing and monitoring these strategies. And 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment process. When faced with potential regulatory shifts, professionals should engage with legal and compliance teams, conduct thorough scenario planning, and ensure that all strategic decisions are made with a clear understanding of the potential regulatory implications and the company's ability to comply. Question 7. Analysis of potential risks to Mattel's brand reputation and consumer trust. Considering the company's commitment to product safety and ethical manufacturing practices, what is the most appropriate approach to risk assessment in this context? Option A. Prioritizing the identification and mitigation of risks that could lead to significant financial loss or legal penalties, while considering the potential impact on consumer perception. Option B. Focusing exclusively on risks that directly impact short-term profitability, assuming that market forces will naturally address any broader ethical or reputational concerns. Option C. Implementing a risk assessment process that solely relies on historical data of past incidents, neglecting emerging trends or potential future threats to Mattel's operations and reputation. Option D. Conducting a superficial review of potential risks, primarily to ensure compliance with the minimum legal requirements without deep consideration of ethical implications or long-term brand impact. The correct answer is A. Prioritizing the identification and mitigation of risks that could lead to significant financial loss or legal penalties, while considering the potential impact on consumer perception. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment principles within the specific context of Mattel's operations and the applicable regulatory framework. The challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing risks that could impact the company's reputation, financial stability, and ability to operate ethically, all while adhering to the Mattel hiring assessment test's implied regulatory environment, which we will assume for this exercise is U.S.-based, focusing on general business ethics and consumer protection principles. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between potential risks and actual threats, and to determine the most effective mitigation strategies. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment that considers both the likelihood and potential impact of identified risks. This aligns with general principles of good corporate governance and ethical business conduct, which are implicitly tested in a hiring assessment. By systematically identifying potential issues, evaluating their severity, and developing mitigation plans, Mattel can safeguard its brand, protect consumers, and ensure long-term sustainability. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes responsible business practices and demonstrates a commitment to stakeholder well-being. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate financial gains without considering broader implications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a short-sighted perspective that neglects potential reputational damage, legal liabilities, and erosion of consumer trust. Such an approach would violate ethical obligations to act in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders, and could lead to significant regulatory scrutiny and penalties if it contravenes consumer protection laws or industry standards. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes compliance with the letter of the law over its spirit would also be professionally unsound. While legal compliance is essential, a truly ethical risk assessment goes beyond mere adherence to regulations. It involves anticipating potential harms and taking proactive steps to prevent them, even if not explicitly mandated by law. Failing to do so demonstrates a lack of ethical foresight and could expose Mattel to unforeseen risks and public criticism. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes 1. Risk identification, brainstorming all potential risks across various operational areas. 2. Risk analysis, evaluating the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 3. Risk evaluation, prioritizing risks based on their severity and potential consequences. 4. Risk treatment, developing and implementing strategies to mitigate, transfer, accept, or avoid risks. 5. Risk monitoring and review, continuously assessing the effectiveness of mitigation strategies and updating the risk assessment as needed. This systematic process ensures that risks are managed effectively and ethically. Question 8. The efficiency study reveals that certain cost allocation methods used by Mattel may have resulted in the overstatement of reported profits in prior periods. What is the most appropriate initial step for Mattel's management to take in response to this finding? Option A. Disregard the findings as they relate to past periods and focus solely on optimizing cost allocations for future periods. Option B. Publicly announce the potential for past profit overstatements to preemptively address investor concerns. Option C. Initiate a thorough review of the cost allocation methods and consult with internal accounting and legal experts to assess the materiality and potential impact on past and future financial reporting. Option D. Immediately adjust current period financial statements to reflect the corrected cost allocations without further investigation. The correct answer is D. Immediately adjust current period financial statements to reflect the corrected cost allocations without further investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, has a responsibility to its shareholders and the market to accurately report its financial performance. The efficiency study, while intended to identify cost savings, has uncovered a potential issue that could impact reported earnings. The core of the challenge lies in determining how to address this finding in a manner that is both compliant with regulatory requirements and ethically sound, ensuring transparency and avoiding any misrepresentation of the company's financial health. Careful judgment is required to balance the desire for operational improvement with the imperative of accurate financial reporting. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the findings of the efficiency study, particularly concerning any identified discrepancies or potential misstatements that could affect Mattel's financial reporting. This would include consulting with internal accounting and legal teams and potentially external auditors to assess the materiality and implications of the study's findings. The regulatory framework, specifically the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and its associated rules, e.g. Rule 10b-5, mandates that companies must not make untrue statements of material fact or omit to state a material fact necessary to make the statements made, in light of the circumstances under which they were made, not misleading in connection with the purchase or sale of any security. Therefore, any identified issues that could materially impact financial statements must be investigated, and if necessary, disclosed or corrected in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, and SEC reporting requirements. This ensures that investors have accurate information upon which to base their investment decisions. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the findings of the efficiency study, especially if they suggest potential misstatements or issues that could affect Mattel's reported earnings. This would violate the principle of accurate financial reporting and could lead to violations of securities laws, such as Section 10b of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and SEC Rule 10b-5, which prohibit fraudulent or misleading statements in connection with the purchase or sale of securities. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately implement changes based solely on the efficiency study, without a proper assessment of their financial reporting implications. This could inadvertently create new misstatements or fail to address existing ones, leading to noncompliance. Furthermore, attempting to conceal or manipulate the findings to present a more favorable financial picture would constitute fraud and a severe breach of ethical and legal obligations. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting all findings from internal studies. 2. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment to determine the potential financial and regulatory impact of the findings. 3. Consulting with relevant internal departments, e.g., finance, legal, compliance, and external advisors, e.g., auditors, to ensure a thorough understanding of the implications. 4. Developing and implementing a plan to address any identified issues in a compliant and transparent manner, which may include restating financial statements if necessary. 5. Ensuring all actions are documented and align with company policies and regulatory requirements. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates that Mattel is considering a new, innovative marketing campaign for a popular toy line that leverages user-generated content and social media engagement. What is the most prudent approach to managing the potential risks associated with this campaign? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify potential regulatory, ethical, and reputational risks, and develop mitigation strategies before launching the campaign. Option B. Rely on the legal department to review the campaign materials for compliance after the campaign has been launched. Option C. Proceed with the campaign as planned, focusing on maximizing engagement and sales, and address any issues that arise reactively. Option D. Limit the campaign's scope to only established, low-risk social media platforms to minimize potential negative exposure. Correct answer is C. Proceed with the campaign as planned, focusing on maximizing engagement and sales, and address any issues that arise reactively. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's strategic objectives with its ethical and regulatory obligations. Mattel, as a global toy manufacturer, operates in a highly regulated environment, particularly concerning product safety, marketing practices, and data privacy. A risk assessment approach is crucial to identify potential threats to the company's reputation, financial stability, and legal standing. The challenge lies in proactively identifying these risks, evaluating their potential impact, and developing mitigation strategies that align with both business goals and compliance requirements. Careful judgment is needed to prioritize risks and allocate resources effectively. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that systematically identifies, analyzes, and evaluates potential risks associated with the proposed marketing campaign. This includes considering regulatory compliance, e.g., advertising standards, data protection laws relevant to children, ethical considerations, e.g., potential for misleading advertising, impact on vulnerable consumers, and reputational damage. By proactively identifying these risks and developing appropriate controls or mitigation plans, Mattel can proceed with the campaign in a responsible and compliant manner, safeguarding its stakeholders and its brand. This aligns with general principles of good corporate governance and risk management, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory bodies overseeing consumer products and marketing. An approach that focuses solely on the potential for increased sales without considering the associated risks is professionally unacceptable. This overlooks the fundamental duty to operate within legal and ethical boundaries. Specifically, ignoring potential regulatory breaches, such as those related to advertising to children or data privacy, could lead to significant fines, legal action, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss potential risks as minor without proper evaluation. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to appreciate the interconnectedness of business operations and regulatory compliance. Such an oversight could result in unforeseen negative consequences that could have been avoided with a thorough risk assessment. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives and the relevant regulatory landscape. This should be followed by a systematic risk identification and assessment phase, where potential risks are brainstormed, analyzed for likelihood and impact, and then prioritized. Mitigation strategies should then be developed for high-priority risks, and these strategies should be integrated into the campaign plan. Finally, ongoing monitoring and review are essential to ensure that the mitigation strategies remain effective and to identify any new emerging risks. This iterative process ensures that business decisions are informed by a robust understanding of potential downsides and are aligned with the company's commitment to responsible conduct. Question 10. Research into Mattel's new smart toy initiative has revealed potential data privacy concerns related to the collection and storage of children's voice recordings. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical best practices for addressing this risk? Option A. Proceed with the launch, assuming that parental consent, once obtained, covers all data collection activities and address any privacy complaints as they arise. Option B. Rely on existing general data protection guidelines without conducting a specific assessment for this new product, assuming they are sufficient. Option C. Focus primarily on the marketing benefits of the voice recording feature, downplaying the data collection aspects in promotional materials to avoid alarming consumers. Option D. Implement robust data encryption and anonymization techniques, conduct a thorough privacy impact assessment, and ensure clear, easily understandable privacy policies are provided to parents before activation. Correct answer is D. Implement robust data encryption and anonymization techniques, conduct a thorough privacy impact assessment, and ensure clear, easily understandable privacy policies are provided to parents before activation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's strategic objectives with the ethical and regulatory obligations concerning risk assessment. Mattel, as a global toy manufacturer, operates in a highly regulated environment where product safety and consumer trust are paramount. A failure in risk assessment can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, harm to consumers, particularly children. Careful judgment is required to identify, analyze, and mitigate potential risks effectively, ensuring compliance with all applicable regulations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive risk assessment process that integrates regulatory compliance and ethical considerations from the outset. This approach is right because it aligns with the fundamental principles of responsible corporate conduct and regulatory frameworks designed to protect consumers and maintain market integrity. Specifically, it necessitates understanding and applying relevant regulations, e.g., consumer product safety standards, data privacy laws if applicable to user data collected by toys, to identify potential hazards and non-compliance issues. Ethically, it reflects a commitment to product safety and consumer well-being, which is crucial for maintaining brand reputation and long-term business sustainability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate financial implications without considering regulatory adherence would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for legal obligations, potentially leading to severe penalties and legal action. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of product development over thorough risk identification would also be ethically and regulatorily flawed. This haste could overlook critical safety concerns, directly contravening regulations designed to prevent harm. Finally, an approach that relies on outdated risk assessment methodologies or fails to adapt to evolving regulatory landscapes would be insufficient and could expose Mattel to unforeseen risks and noncompliance. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory environment. This involves actively seeking out and interpreting applicable laws and guidelines. The next step is to identify potential risks across the entire product lifecycle, from design and manufacturing to marketing and post-sale support. For each identified risk, a qualitative and quantitative assessment should be performed, considering the likelihood and impact. Mitigation strategies should then be developed and implemented, with clear accountability assigned. Finally, a continuous monitoring and review process is essential to ensure the effectiveness of risk management strategies and to adapt to new or emerging risks and regulatory changes. Question 11. Market research demonstrates a significant opportunity for Mattel to introduce a new line of interactive educational toys for preschoolers. Before committing to full-scale production and marketing, what is the most prudent approach to managing the associated risks? Option A. Rely on the marketing team's intuition regarding potential risks without formal legal or compliance review. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential legal, ethical, and safety concerns, and develop mitigation strategies in line with relevant U.S. consumer protection laws and industry best practices. Option C. Proceed with a rapid product launch to capture market share, addressing any issues that arise post-launch as they occur. Option D. Focus solely on the potential profitability of the new product line, assuming that any regulatory hurdles will be minor and manageable. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential legal, ethical, and safety concerns, and develop mitigation strategies in line with relevant U.S. consumer protection laws and industry best practices. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, has a fiduciary duty to its shareholders and must operate within the bounds of regulatory compliance. The introduction of a new product line, especially one targeting a sensitive demographic, necessitates a thorough risk assessment to identify potential legal, ethical, and reputational hazards. The challenge lies in balancing innovation and market opportunity with the imperative to protect the company and its stakeholders from undue risk. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all potential risks are identified, evaluated, and mitigated in accordance with applicable regulations and ethical standards. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive risk assessment that integrates legal, ethical, and business considerations. This approach is best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it requires identifying potential risks associated with the new product, such as those related to child safety, marketing practices, intellectual property, and data privacy, and then developing strategies to mitigate these risks. This proactive stance helps Mattel avoid potential fines, lawsuits, and reputational damage, thereby safeguarding shareholder value and maintaining public trust. Adherence to regulations like the Consumer Product Safety Act, CSA, and the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, will be paramount in this assessment. An approach that prioritizes immediate market entry without a thorough risk assessment is professionally unacceptable. Its failure would constitute a violation of the duty of care owed to shareholders and could lead to significant legal repercussions if the product poses a safety hazard or if marketing practices are deemed deceptive or exploitative, especially concerning children. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial risk assessment that only considers obvious financial risks, neglecting potential ethical or legal liabilities. This oversight could result in noncompliance with regulations designed to protect consumers, particularly vulnerable groups like children, leading to regulatory sanctions and reputational damage. Furthermore, an approach that relies solely on internal legal counsel without seeking external expertise when necessary could miss critical nuances in evolving regulatory landscapes or specialized areas of law, increasing the likelihood of noncompliance. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with identifying the objective and the relevant regulatory environment. This is followed by a systematic identification of potential risks, an evaluation of their likelihood and impact, and the development of mitigation strategies. This process should be iterative and involve cross-functional teams, including legal, marketing, product development, and compliance departments. When faced with uncertainty or complex regulatory interpretations, seeking expert advice, whether internal or external, is crucial. The ultimate decision should be based on a balanced consideration of potential rewards against identified and mitigated risks, ensuring alignment with legal obligations and ethical principles. Question 12. Comparative studies suggest that companies facing significant supply chain disruptions and evolving consumer preferences must proactively manage their risk exposure. For Mattel, a global toy manufacturer, how should the company's leadership approach the assessment and communication of these potential financial impacts to ensure compliance with U.S. securities regulations and maintain investor trust? Option A. Focus primarily on highlighting positive sales trends and new product launches, with only a brief, general mention of potential market challenges, without specific details. Option B. Prioritize internal discussions about risk mitigation strategies among the executive team, without disclosing the identified risks or their potential impact to external stakeholders until a comprehensive solution is finalized. Option C. Acknowledge the existence of supply chain and consumer preference risks, but defer detailed analysis and disclosure until such risks materialize into significant financial losses. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment identifying potential supply chain vulnerabilities and shifts in consumer demand, quantifying their potential financial impact, and disclosing material findings in the company's SEC filings and investor communications. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment identifying potential supply chain vulnerabilities and shifts in consumer demand, quantifying their potential financial impact, and disclosing material findings in the company's SEC filings and investor communications. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight, particularly concerning financial reporting and investor communications. The pressure to present a positive financial outlook, while also acknowledging potential risks, requires a delicate balance. Misrepresenting or downplaying significant risks can lead to regulatory penalties, loss of investor confidence, and reputational damage. The core of the challenge lies in accurately assessing and communicating the impact of external factors on the company's financial performance in a way that is both compliant with regulations and transparent to stakeholders. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies, analyzes, and quantifies potential threats to Mattel's financial stability and operational continuity. This includes evaluating the likelihood and potential impact of each identified risk. Subsequently, this assessment must inform the company's financial disclosures, ensuring that material risks are adequately disclosed to investors and regulatory bodies, such as the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, in the United States. This aligns with the SEC's disclosure requirements, which mandate the disclosure of known trends, events, or uncertainties that are reasonably likely to have a material effect on the company's financial condition or results of operations. Ethical considerations also demand transparency and honesty in financial reporting to maintain market integrity and protect investors. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on optimistic projections without a thorough evaluation of downside risks. This fails to meet regulatory obligations for disclosure of material information and can be interpreted as misleading investors. Another incorrect approach is to acknowledge risks but fail to quantify their potential impact or outline mitigation strategies. This lack of specificity renders the disclosure insufficient for informed decision-making by investors. Finally, prioritizing short-term stock price performance over accurate and complete risk disclosure is a direct violation of fiduciary duties and regulatory mandates, leading to severe consequences. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a proactive and thorough risk identification process. This should be followed by a rigorous analysis of the potential impact of these risks on the company's financial performance and operations. The findings of this assessment must then be integrated into all relevant financial reporting and public disclosures, ensuring compliance with all applicable regulations, such as those set forth by the SEC. Regular review and updates to the risk assessment process are crucial to adapt to evolving market conditions and emerging threats. Question 13. Market research demonstrates a significant opportunity for Mattel to expand its presence in emerging markets with a new line of interactive electronic toys. However, the proposed manufacturing process involves novel materials and advanced circuitry that have not been extensively tested for long-term durability and potential allergenicity in diverse environmental conditions. What is the most responsible approach for Mattel to take regarding risk assessment for this new product line? Option A. Rely on existing safety certifications for similar electronic components used in previous Mattel products, assuming the new materials and circuitry will pose comparable risks. Option B. Conduct a thorough, multi-stage risk assessment that includes material analysis, hazard identification, exposure assessment, and the development of robust mitigation strategies, ensuring compliance with all relevant international toy safety standards before market launch. Option C. Focus risk assessment solely on the primary intended use of the toy, assuming that any unintended uses or misuse by consumers are beyond Mattel's responsibility. Option D. Prioritize rapid market entry to capture first-mover advantage, deferring comprehensive risk assessment and mitigation until post-launch product performance data is available. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough, multi-stage risk assessment that includes material analysis, hazard identification, exposure assessment, and the development of robust mitigation strategies, ensuring compliance with all relevant international toy safety standards before market launch. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's desire for market expansion with the ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure product safety and compliance. The pressure to launch new products quickly can create a conflict of interest, where speed might be prioritized over thorough risk assessment. Careful judgment is required to navigate this tension and uphold Mattel's commitment to responsible product development. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment process that integrates regulatory compliance from the outset. This means identifying potential hazards associated with new materials and manufacturing processes, evaluating the likelihood and severity of associated risks, and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies before product launch. This approach aligns with the principles of consumer protection and product stewardship, ensuring that Mattel meets its legal obligations and maintains public trust. Specifically, this would involve adhering to relevant toy safety standards and regulations applicable in the target markets, such as those outlined by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, in the United States, which mandates rigorous testing and compliance for all toys sold. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over safety would involve a superficial review of potential risks, relying solely on historical data, without considering the unique aspects of the new product line. This could lead to overlooking novel hazards introduced by new materials or manufacturing techniques, potentially resulting in non-compliance with safety regulations and exposing consumers, particularly children, to harm. Another incorrect approach would be to defer comprehensive risk assessment until after the product has entered the market, which is a reactive and irresponsible strategy. This not only violates regulatory requirements for pre-market safety evaluation, but also carries significant reputational and financial risks for Mattel, including product recalls, fines, and damage to brand image. A third incorrect approach might involve assuming that compliance in one market automatically translates to compliance in all target markets, ignoring the fact that regulatory landscapes can differ significantly. This oversight could lead to unintentional violations in new territories. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes a risk-based approach to product development. This involves establishing clear internal policies and procedures for risk assessment, ensuring adequate resources are allocated for safety testing and compliance, and fostering a culture where safety concerns can be raised and addressed without fear of reprisal. When faced with pressure to accelerate timelines, professionals should advocate for a balanced approach that integrates risk management into every stage of the product lifecycle, ensuring that regulatory requirements are met and consumer safety is paramount. Question 14. Regulatory review indicates that Mattel is developing a new line of interactive electronic toys for the U.S. market. To accelerate the launch and gain a competitive edge, the product development team is considering bypassing a detailed, pre-development risk assessment focused on specific U.S. consumer safety regulations, opting instead for a more general compliance check during the later stages of manufacturing, which approach best aligns with regulatory expectations for Mattel's product development process in the United States. Option A. Focus primarily on market research and consumer appeal, assuming that existing general compliance protocols will adequately cover the regulatory requirements for this new product category. Option B. Proceed with the product development, relying on standard quality control checks during manufacturing to identify and address any regulatory issues before shipment to U.S. retailers. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive, early-stage risk assessment that specifically identifies potential hazards and compliance gaps related to U.S. consumer safety laws and regulations for electronic toys, integrating mitigation strategies into the design and development phases. Option D. Defer detailed regulatory compliance review until after the product has been launched and initial consumer feedback is received, allowing for adjustments based on real-world usage. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive, early-stage risk assessment that specifically identifies potential hazards and compliance gaps related to U.S. consumer safety laws and regulations for electronic toys, integrating mitigation strategies into the design and development phases. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's strategic objectives with the imperative to maintain robust risk management practices, particularly in the context of new product development. The pressure to innovate and capture market share can sometimes lead to overlooking potential risks or adopting shortcuts that compromise compliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the pursuit of business goals does not lead to regulatory breaches or ethical lapses. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment that integrates regulatory compliance from the outset of the product development lifecycle. This means identifying potential regulatory hurdles, assessing their impact, and developing mitigation strategies before significant resources are committed. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible product stewardship and demonstrates a commitment to operating within the established legal and ethical frameworks. Specifically, It adheres to the spirit of regulations that mandate due diligence and risk management in business operation, ensuring that Mattel's new toy line for the U.S. market complies with all relevant Consumer Product Safety Commission (CPSC) standards and other applicable U.S. federal and state laws. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed to market over thorough risk evaluation would fail to identify potential safety hazards or non-compliance issues early on. This could lead to costly product recalls, reputational damage, and significant legal penalties. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on post-launch testing to identify problems, is reactive rather than preventative. This approach is inherently riskier as it allows potential harm to consumers or regulatory violations to occur before being addressed. A third incorrect approach, which assumes existing compliance measures are sufficient without specific review for the new product category, ignores the unique risks associated with novel product designs or materials. This can lead to unforeseen compliance gaps. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to the specific product and market. This involves consulting legal and compliance experts, conducting thorough due diligence, and embedding risk assessment into the project management process. The framework should prioritize identifying and mitigating risks early, fostering a culture where compliance is seen as an enabler of innovation, not an impediment. Question 15. Consider a scenario where a Mattel product development manager is responsible for evaluating proposals from a new toy supplier. During a social event outside of work, the manager unexpectedly encounters a close personal friend who happens to be a senior executive at this potential supplier company. The friend makes a casual remark about their company's innovative new product line that they believe would be a perfect fit for Mattel. The manager knows this friend has been seeking new business opportunities with Mattel. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Mattel product development manager in this situation? Option A. Politely decline to discuss any business matters with the friend and avoid any further interaction with them until the supplier evaluation is complete. Option B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the casual remark to their manager and Mattel's compliance department, requesting guidance on how to proceed with the supplier evaluation process. Option C. Downplay the significance of the personal relationship and continue with the evaluation, believing that the friend's remark was purely coincidental and not an attempt to gain an advantage. Option D. Proceed with evaluating the supplier's proposal as usual, assuming the personal friendship will not influence their professional judgment. Correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the casual remark to their manager and Mattel's compliance department, requesting guidance on how to proceed with the supplier evaluation process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Mattel employee due to the inherent conflict between maintaining business relationships and upholding ethical standards regarding potential conflicts of interest. The employee must navigate the company's internal policies and relevant regulations to ensure that personal relationships do not improperly influence business decisions, thereby protecting Mattel's reputation and financial integrity. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between appropriate professional courtesies and actions that could be perceived as, or actually are, a conflict of interest. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate internal channels at Mattel. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency and adherence to Mattel's code of conduct and any applicable regulatory guidelines concerning business ethics and conflicts of interest. By disclosing, the employee allows Mattel to assess the situation and implement appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from decision-making processes or additional oversight, thereby mitigating any risk of impropriety. This aligns with the ethical imperative to act in the best interest of the company and avoid situations that could compromise objectivity. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the business discussion without any disclosure. This failure to disclose a potential conflict of interest violates the trust placed in the employee and can lead to accusations of favor-taking or unfair advantage. It exposes Mattel to reputational damage and potential regulatory scrutiny if the relationship is later found to have influenced business outcomes. Another incorrect approach would be to downplay the significance of the relationship or assume it poses no risk. This subjective assessment, without formal disclosure and review, is insufficient to meet ethical and regulatory obligations. It ignores the appearance of impropriety which can be as damaging as actual impropriety. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to terminate the professional relationship abruptly and without explanation solely due to the personal connection. While avoiding a conflict is important, doing so in a manner that could damage business relationships or appear unprofessional without a clear, disclosed rationale is not the optimal solution. It fails to leverage Mattel's internal processes for managing such situations effectively. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Mattel's conflict of interest policy and relevant ethical guidelines. When a potential conflict arises, the employee should first identify the nature of the relationship and the business context. Then, they should assess whether this relationship could reasonably be perceived to influence their professional judgment or create an unfair advantage. If such a risk exists, the immediate and necessary step is to disclose the situation to their manager or the designated compliance department at Mattel, seeking guidance on how to proceed. This proactive and transparent approach is crucial for maintaining professional integrity and safeguarding the company's interests. Question 16. Strategic planning requires Mattel to assess potential risks associated with launching a new line of interactive toys. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates a commitment to responsible and compliant product development? Option A. Focusing exclusively on the potential financial returns of the new toy line, with minimal consideration for non-financial risks. Option B. Conducting a thorough risk assessment that considers legal compliance, consumer safety, data privacy, and ethical implications, and integrating mitigation strategies into the product development lifecycle. Option C. Assigning the entire risk assessment responsibility to the product engineering team, assuming they possess all necessary expertise. Option D. Prioritizing rapid product development and market entry, with risk assessment conducted only after the product has been released to address any issues that arise. The correct answer is B. Conducting a thorough risk assessment that considers legal compliance, consumer safety, data privacy, and ethical implications, and integrating mitigation strategies into the product development lifecycle. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight, particularly concerning financial reporting and risk management. The challenge lies in balancing the need for strategic growth and innovation with the imperative to maintain compliance and ethical conduct. A failure to adequately assess and mitigate risks associated with a new product launch could lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. Careful judgment is required to identify potential pitfalls and implement appropriate controls. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive risk assessment process that integrates regulatory compliance and ethical considerations from the outset. This approach ensures that potential legal, financial, and reputational risks are identified, evaluated, and addressed before they materialize. By embedding risk assessment into the strategic planning phase, Mattel can make informed decisions that align with its legal obligations and ethical standards, thereby safeguarding its stakeholders and long-term viability. This aligns with general principles of good corporate governance and risk management, which are implicitly expected of all public companies, including those operating under U.S. regulations. An approach that prioritizes speed to market over thorough risk evaluation is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct adequate due diligence could lead to the launch of a product that violates consumer protection laws, intellectual property rights, or advertising standards. Such a lapse would expose Mattel to significant legal liabilities and regulatory sanctions. Another incorrect approach is to delegate risk assessment solely to the product development team, without involving legal and compliance departments. This siloed approach risks overlooking critical regulatory requirements or ethical considerations that are outside the immediate purview of product design. It fails to leverage the specialized expertise necessary for comprehensive risk identification and mitigation, potentially leading to non-compliance and reputational harm. Finally, an approach that focuses only on financial risks while neglecting ethical and reputational risks is also professionally unsound. While financial viability is crucial, a company's ethical standing and public perception are equally important for sustained success. Ignoring these aspects can lead to consumer backlash, boycotts, and long-term damage to brand loyalty, which ultimately impacts financial performance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes a holistic and integrated approach to risk management. This involves establishing clear risk appetite statements, implementing robust risk identification and assessment methodologies, developing effective risk mitigation strategies, and establishing ongoing monitoring and reporting mechanisms. Collaboration across departments, including legal, compliance, finance, and operations, is essential to ensure that all potential risks are considered and addressed comprehensively. Question 17. The investigation demonstrates that a new line of interactive toys for Mattel's upcoming holiday season has received early, unverified feedback suggesting potential issues with data privacy and user interaction. What is the most professionally responsible approach for the assessment team to take? Option A. Immediately halt all development and marketing of the new toy line pending a comprehensive, independent audit of all data handling and user interface components. Option B. Conduct a preliminary internal review of the feedback, cross-referencing it with existing product safety and privacy protocols, and escalate any confirmed concerns to the relevant department heads for further investigation. Option C. Publicly acknowledge the unverified feedback and initiate a broad consumer survey to gauge the extent of potential problems before any internal assessment. Option D. Dismiss the feedback as speculative and continue with the planned product launch, assuming that any issues will be addressed post-release if they arise. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt all development and marketing of the new toy line pending a comprehensive, independent audit of all data handling and user interface components. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual at Mattel to balance the need for thorough risk assessment with the potential for creating undue alarm or impacting business operations prematurely. The core difficulty lies in identifying and evaluating potential risks associated with a new product line without succumbing to speculation or overreacting. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the assessment is objective, evidence-based, and aligned with Mattel's ethical standards and any applicable consumer protection regulations. The correct approach involves a systematic and objective evaluation of potential risks. This means gathering all available information, consulting with relevant internal departments, e.g., legal, product safety, marketing, and considering a range of potential negative outcomes, from minor product defects to significant reputational damage or regulatory noncompliance. This methodical process ensures that any identified risks are properly understood, prioritized, and addressed through appropriate mitigation strategies, adhering to principles of responsible product development and consumer safety. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate negative publicity without a thorough risk assessment fails to uphold professional responsibility. This approach might lead to premature decisions that are not supported by evidence, potentially harming the company's reputation or financial standing unnecessarily. It bypasses the due diligence required to understand the actual likelihood and impact of risks, which is a fundamental ethical obligation in product development and risk management. Another incorrect approach that involves downplaying or ignoring potential risks, even if they seem minor initially, is also professionally unacceptable. This can lead to significant harm to consumers and severe repercussions for Mattel, including regulatory penalties, lawsuits, and loss of consumer trust. Ethical and regulatory frameworks mandate a proactive stance on identifying and managing risks, rather than a reactive one. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This typically includes identifying potential hazards, analyzing the likelihood and impact of those hazards, evaluating the overall risk level, and determining appropriate control measures. Professionals should always consult relevant internal policies, industry best practices, and applicable regulations. When in doubt, seeking guidance from legal counsel or subject matter experts is crucial to ensure decisions are sound, ethical, and compliant. Question 18. The analysis reveals that a potential manufacturing defect has been identified in a batch of popular children's toys produced by Mattel, which could pose a minor safety concern for young children. What is the most appropriate risk assessment and mitigation approach for Mattel to adopt in this situation? Option A. Implement a minor design modification to future production runs to prevent recurrence without addressing the existing affected batch. Minimize immediate financial impact. Option B. Immediately initiate a voluntary recall of the affected product batch, conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the defect, and communicate transparently with relevant consumer safety agencies. Option C. Conduct a limited internal investigation to confirm the defect's existence, but delay any external communication or product action until a definitive and widespread impact is proven. Option D. Continue selling the affected product batch while monitoring consumer feedback for any reported incidents, and only consider action if a significant number of complaints arise. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a voluntary recall of the affected product batch, conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the defect, and communicate transparently with relevant consumer safety agencies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment principles within the context of a specific regulatory environment, likely related to toy manufacturing and consumer safety, as implied by the Mattel hiring assessment test context. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate risk mitigation strategy when faced with potential product defects that could impact consumer safety and brand reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance the urgency of addressing a potential issue with the need for thorough investigation and adherence to established protocols. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic risk assessment that prioritizes consumer safety and regulatory compliance. This approach is right because it aligns with the fundamental principles of product stewardship and the ethical obligation to ensure products are safe for their intended users. Specifically, it would involve a multifaceted strategy that includes immediate containment of the potential issue, thorough investigation to determine the root cause and scope, and transparent communication with relevant stakeholders, including regulatory bodies if required by law. This aligns with the spirit of regulations designed to protect consumers and maintain market integrity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost-saving measures without adequately addressing the potential safety implications would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the ethical duty of care to consumers and could lead to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and potential legal liabilities. Another incorrect approach that involves delaying investigation or downplaying the severity of the potential issue also represents a failure to uphold professional standards. Such inaction could exacerbate the problem, leading to wider distribution of a potentially unsafe product and a more severe crisis when the issue eventually comes to light. Ignoring potential risks or prioritizing speed over thoroughness violates the core tenets of responsible product management and regulatory adherence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential risks, assessing their likelihood and impact, and then developing appropriate mitigation strategies. This framework should be guided by regulatory requirements, ethical considerations, and a commitment to consumer well-being. When faced with uncertainty, the default should be to err on the side of caution, ensuring that all potential risks are thoroughly investigated and addressed before a product reaches the market or while it is in circulation. Question 19. Market research demonstrates a significant untapped consumer base for Mattel's products in a developing nation with a rapidly growing economy, but also a history of political instability and evolving regulatory frameworks. Mattel is considering a substantial investment to establish a manufacturing and distribution presence there. Which approach best addresses the associated risks for Mattel? Option A. Initiate a limited product trial in the market, relying on local partners to manage operational complexities and regulatory navigation without extensive internal due diligence. Option B. Focus solely on the projected revenue growth and market share gains, deferring any detailed risk analysis until after the initial market entry. Option C. Prioritize immediate market penetration and brand visibility by launching a full-scale operation, assuming the potential rewards outweigh any foreseeable challenges. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, identifying potential political, economic, regulatory, and operational risks, and develop contingency plans for each before committing to significant investment. The correct answer is C. Prioritize immediate market penetration and brand visibility by launching a full-scale operation, assuming the potential rewards outweigh any foreseeable challenges. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Mattel, as a publicly traded company, has a fiduciary duty to its shareholders to act in their best interests. This duty is intertwined with regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The challenge lies in balancing the potential for increased market share and brand recognition with the inherent risks associated with entering a new, potentially volatile market. A robust risk assessment process is crucial to identify, evaluate, and mitigate these risks before committing significant resources. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that systematically identifies potential threats to Mattel's financial stability, brand reputation, and operational integrity in the new market. This includes evaluating regulatory compliance, geopolitical stability, economic conditions, and competitive landscape. By proactively identifying and planning for these risks, Mattel can make an informed decision about market entry, potentially developing mitigation strategies, or deciding against entry if the risks are deemed too high. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and responsible business practices, which are implicitly expected under general business law and ethical codes of conduct for publicly traded companies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential for immediate profit without a thorough risk evaluation fails to uphold the fiduciary duty to shareholders. This oversight can lead to significant financial losses, reputational damage, and regulatory penalties if unforeseen issues arise. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes brand expansion at any cost, ignoring potential ethical concerns or regulatory noncompliance in the target market, is also professionally unacceptable. Such an approach could expose Mattel to legal liabilities, consumer backlash, and long-term damage to its brand image, violating ethical standards and potentially specific regulations related to consumer protection or fair trade practices. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or superficial market analysis, rather than rigorous data-driven assessment, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and professional responsibility. This can lead to misinformed decisions with potentially severe consequences. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives of market entry. This should be followed by a thorough risk identification and assessment phase, considering all relevant internal and external factors. Subsequently, potential mitigation strategies should be developed, and a cost-benefit analysis, incorporating risk-adjusted returns, should be performed. Finally, the decision to proceed, delay, or abandon market entry should be based on a holistic evaluation of the identified risks and potential rewards, ensuring alignment with the company's strategic goals and ethical obligations. Question 20. To address the challenge of entering a new international market with a novel product line, what is the most appropriate approach for Mattel to ensure compliance with relevant regulations and uphold ethical business practices? Option A. Implement a generic risk mitigation plan that is applied uniformly across all new market entries, without specific consideration for the unique regulatory and cultural nuances of the target region. Option B. Prioritize rapid market penetration and address any regulatory or ethical issues that arise after the product launch, relying on legal counsel to resolve problems as they occur. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that identifies potential legal, ethical, and operational challenges specific to the new market, developing mitigation strategies that align with Mattel's code of conduct and applicable international and local laws. Option D. Focus the risk assessment primarily on financial projections and competitive analysis, assuming that legal and ethical compliance will be adequately handled by local distributors. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that identifies potential legal, ethical, and operational challenges specific to the new market, developing mitigation strategies that align with Mattel's code of conduct and applicable international and local laws. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's strategic objectives with its ethical and regulatory obligations. Mattel, as a publicly traded company, must adhere to various regulations designed to ensure fair and transparent business practices. The challenge lies in identifying potential risks associated with a new market entry and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies without stifling innovation or creating undue barriers to growth. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate business risks and potential violations of ethical standards or legal requirements. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment process that integrates ethical considerations and regulatory compliance from the outset. This approach recognizes that understanding the legal and ethical landscape of a new market is as crucial as understanding its commercial potential. By identifying potential risks such as intellectual property infringement, consumer protection issues, or anti-bribery and corruption concerns, Mattel can develop targeted strategies to mitigate these risks. This aligns with regulatory expectations for due diligence and responsible corporate conduct, ensuring that expansion is undertaken ethically and legally. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize market entry speed over thorough risk evaluation. This could lead to overlooking critical regulatory requirements, such as data privacy laws in a new region, or ethical considerations like labor practices in the supply chain. Such oversights can result in significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of stakeholder trust. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on legal counsel for risk assessment without incorporating broader ethical frameworks or considering the company's own internal code of conduct. This can lead to a narrow interpretation of risks, potentially missing subtle but significant ethical dilemmas or reputational threats. Finally, adopting a reactive stance, where risks are only addressed after they materialize, is fundamentally flawed. This approach is costly, damaging, and indicative of poor corporate governance, failing to meet the proactive compliance standards expected of responsible businesses. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the company's risk appetite and ethical commitments. This framework should involve cross-functional collaboration, bringing together legal, compliance, marketing, and operations teams to identify and assess potential risks from multiple perspectives. A structured risk assessment methodology, including scenario planning and impact analysis, should be utilized. Crucially, the process must be iterative, with regular reviews and updates as new information becomes available or market conditions change. This ensures that risk management is an ongoing activity, not a one-time event, and that Mattel's operations remain compliant and ethically sound.